Well, hold on to your hats, folks, because this one, I'm going to do my best to avoid a rant, but it's really irritating. The Washington Post, the newspaper where democracy goes to die in bullshit and propaganda, the Washington Post posted an op-ed on the 3rd of April 2023 in which they basically said that veterans don't deserve disability payments and that we should pay the bill for D.C. politicians' irresponsibility. Now, mind you, they bend over backwards within the article, especially at the beginning, to say that we owe veterans our thanks for our freedom and all they've sacrificed for us. But that's just total nonsense. That's just window dressing for what's coming. They list several factors that have led to an exorbitant, enormous growth in the cost of veterans benefits and the Veterans Administration over the past 20 years, but they leave things out of context. And then they attack the benefits and falsely give the impression to the unknowing public that veterans are somehow getting over and scamming the system. They don't say that, but that's their intent. First off, they bemoan the fact that the Veterans Administration in 2000 cost taxpayers $45 billion. And it's grown to over $300 billion in this fiscal year. Now, that's a big jump. But what they don't mention to you is that the federal budget went from $1.9 trillion in 2000 to $7 trillion today. That's also a very big jump, 350%, mind you. So what exactly is going on here? Well, let's see. 20 years of endless combat in the Philippines, in Africa, in the Middle East, in the Arabian Peninsula, in Afghanistan might have something to do with it. Now, they also attribute the growth in disability payments to veterans to advances on the battlefield in medicine that saved more soldiers' lives. Well, I'm sorry. Should we have died on the battlefield to help the VA be fiscally responsible? Is that what you're claiming? The Washington Post claims that the VA isn't serving veterans unless it's also fiscally responsible. We deserve fiscal responsibility. Well, we do. How about the Department of Homeland Oppression, the Federal Bureau of Incompetence, the dunderheads at the Department of Defense, the Department of State, student loan forgiveness? How about some fiscal responsibility there? How about some fiscal responsibility on tax breaks for wealthy people who sell electric vehicles and windmills, wind turbines, and solar photovoltaic panel? These wealthy billionaires who make money off that, you give them tax breaks, and the people, the consumers who buy that. And you want to take away $136 from a disabled veteran? In this story, they tell contradictory stories within the op-ed. The very same op-ed, claiming that the Veterans Disability System established in 1945 has never changed. Well, that's a lie. I just got another letter this month telling me the system has been updated and they've looked at my case and my benefits are under review. Then later in the same op-ed, they change their story saying that it's frequently been changed. Now, here's the most egregious part of this. Well, not the most egregious, but one of the most annoying parts. The Washington Post op-ed compares Veterans Administration disability payments to Social Security disability payments. Now, Social Security disability payments go to people oftentimes who've never worked a day in their life. They're incapable of working because they're disabled, so they get a payment. That's not why we pay veterans for disability. Veterans Administration disability payments are a small measure to help veterans be whole again, much akin to an insurance settlement. If someone hits your car, gives you whiplash, destroys your car, well, when you get a settlement, it's tax exempt and it pays for your medical bills, if it's large enough. It also makes you whole again as best it can with a financial settlement and restores your car. That's the purpose of that. Veterans Administration disability payments are to make a soldier whole. Now, they can't do that. How do you make a person whole who drove over an improvised explosive device in Anbar province and had their testicles blown off and can't procreate now? They'll never have offspring. You can't compensate someone for that. That's a consequence of service, defending your rights, your freedoms, and your liberties. So these leftist hate wakers can go around and make their nonsense. We defend that. Now, the Washington Post cites a Congressional Budget Office estimate that limiting payments for veterans who earn more than $170,000 a year would save $253 billion over the next decade. Or Congress could alternatively tax the benefits or some portion of them, particularly for newer recipients with high incomes. This is vile. So what you're trying to say is that some people are better than others. Some pigs are better than others here on Animal Farm. I don't care if the person who lost both their legs in combat is someone who invents the next artificial intelligence and becomes a trillionaire off of that wealth. They lost 2 limbs in service to this nation, and they deserve to be compensated, the pittance that it is. Unbelievable. What about that kid that's on Fox News who's on that program, The Five, all the time, missing both his legs from combat with a Southern accent? I'm sure he makes more than $170,000. So you're going to means test his physical disability, or you're going to tax it? They seek to tax our disability. Folks, this is insane, absolutely insane. The Veterans Administration is compensating service members under a very complicated formula that is supposed to make them whole in some small measure. I suffer from a number of ailments from my 36 and a half years in uniform, including multiple combat tours, that I'm not compensated for. The VA gave me 0 rating for it. I get nothing. And these are the things that degrade my quality of life. For instance, not being able to sleep more than 10 or 15 minutes at night consistently as a consequence of military service. I get nothing for that. Nerve damage in my feet, I get nothing for that. I do get a percentage for some other things that really, that's just how they work it out. But the bottom line here is that this is disgusting. They seek to tax a disability payment for taking part of our mental, physical health and parts of our body that are missing, for our lives disrupted and damaged or destroyed. This pittance. By the way, let's talk about VA disability payments. Folks, if you think people on VA disability are making a fortune, you're crazy. Even those with 100% disability get no more than $3,600 a month. Now, in Chad, that's a king's fortune. In Bangladesh, you'd live like a king. But in America, $40,000 a year, $36,000 a month, $40,000 a year tax exempt. That's more like making a salary of $55,000. But $40,000 a year with a family of 4, 2 kids, say you had 3 kids before you're injured, that's not going to get you a good life. That's below the poverty line. Most disability payments are $1,000 a month or less. $1,000 less a month. And according to some reports, the average VA disability payment is 10%, which is $124. The average payment is $124. Very few people get 100% disability. I don't even come remotely close to that. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. They want to balance the budget on the backs of veterans, but that's not what it's about. This would never balance the budget. This would never be fiscally responsible. This is vile attack on veterans. And I warned people after the choosing of 2020, they would come after veterans first, denigrate our reputations and our service to the nation, and make false claims about people, and then they would go after the active force. And that's exactly what these scumbags have done for the past 2 years. Look at the January 6th events. Breathlessly, veteran, led the insurrection, veteran. A handful of people who served in uniform, either in uniform, many of them served in Vietnam as draftees, and they were arrested on that day for walking in the building. But they breathlessly talk about how veterans and imply that veterans organized a non-existent insurrection. And look how they've attacked the active duty now with the nonsense going on there over and over again. This is intentional. This is what Marxist culture does. It just breaks down and destroys. It divides people. It's about splitting people apart. It's about destroying all that exists that's good. And that's what they're trying to do to their reputations, veterans. And now they're trying to take away benefits that have been earned. Earned, not an entitlement, and earned by leaving your lungs on the battlefield exposed to toxic chemicals, by suffering from Agent Orange and getting cancer, by losing limbs, by having traumatic brain injury, by losing your family because you can't cope with the situation when you come back from the horrors you've experienced in fulfilling the obligations that our politicians placed upon us. This is reprehensible. The Washington Post should post a front page apology to all the nation's 20 plus million veterans, and to the 5.7 million disability, or 5.7 million veterans getting disability payments from the Veterans Administration. You people are sick and twisted, and you're vile and repulsive. It's as simple as that. Means testing. I don't care if somebody is worth $100 trillion. If they lost something in service to this nation, we have an obligation to restore it as best we can with the trivial payments, at least, that we give them. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, they did mention that one of the reasons why the costs are so much higher are because the cost of medical care and the VA was failing for so many years. True. Tens of thousands of military veterans, including World War II and Korean War veterans, whom we owe a lot to, died because they were denied care or on a waiting list from the Veterans Administration. And within 24 months of those stories coming out, the Washington Post thinks it's appropriate now, after thousands of veterans we find died because of neglect from the Veterans Administration under the Obama administration, under the Bush administration, under the Clinton administration. Just 2 years later, now they want to limit disability payments, claiming it's some sort of cash cow and people are getting over. If you've ever gone through the VA qualification process for disability payments, it's very intrusive. It's very confusing. It's very oblique. It's very opaque. And it's very unfair in many cases. I'm sick of these leftists attacking veterans. Means testing, taxing benefits. You scumbags. They actually tax Social Security. Social Security is reimbursement for what you paid over 40 years of working life. And in 1986, they altered the system because they stole from it for so long, putting the money in current revenues, that there's nothing left. It would have collapsed by now. And now it's going to collapse in 2033 or maybe after that. They actually tax your benefits. People making $30,000 a year, Social Security, they take taxes out of that. It's your retirement pay. Retirement pay should never be taxed. And veterans' disability payments are not so that we can work in an office. We don't get that payment. They're not Social Security disability payments. They're part of making you whole. Screw you, Washington Post. You're repulsive. People stop buying their garbage. Piss on them. Footsec.